Hello students, how are you all? So today we are going to start chapter 3rd of history, which is colonialism rural India. In this chapter you will study about the new revenue system, types of land revenue settlements, growth of commercial crops, the peasant revolt. The new revenue system. In order to incur expenses on maintaining the administrative bodies and big British army, the British brought about widespread changes in the field of revenue system, agriculture, trade and industry in India. These policies were obviously designed to promote British interest in colonial India. This was to be done by increasing trade, buying raw materials from India at cheaper rates and selling manufactured products of England higher at higher rates, and collection of land revenue from the provincial governors. When the British came to India, villagers here were self-sufficient. Most of the needful things were produced here. Farmers owned the land they cultivated. They paid a small part of their produce to the king. If there was ever a flood or drought, the king reduced the land revenue. But the British changed the situation. Revenue was collected by the agents of the company. No concession was given even during the years when crops failed. The land revenue was collected in cash. The economic exploitation of India by the British ruined the peasantry, uprooted the trade and destroyed trade and handicrafts. The British devised several methods to ensure a steady flow of revenue from India. Land revenue became the biggest source of income for the company. Types of land revenue settlements. The British introduced different types of land revenue settlements in different parts of India. Zamindari system or permanent settlement of Bengal. Ryotwari system, Mahalwari system, Zamindari system. Permanent settlements of Zamindari system was introduced by Lord Cornwallis in Bengal in 1793. The main provisions of the settlement. This is the image of Lord Cornwallis. Zamindari was made a hereditary right of the Zamindars under the permanent settlement of the Zamindari Bandobast. They were the owners of the land and were forced to pay 89% of the total revenue to the British government. Their own share was 11%. The system gave birth to a new class called Zamindars. The Zamindars had to pay to evict any cultivator on non-payment for their taxes. The Zamindar got benefit but the condition of the cultivators. Ryotwari system. During 1820 to 27, the Ryotwari system or land revenue was introduced in the Madras Presidency by Thomas Munro. He extended the Ryotwari system to all parts of the provinces, except the permanent settlement areas on the basis of 1/3 of the gross produce of the holdings. It was made between the government and the Ryot or peasant. In this system, the farmers were recognized as the owners of the land and land revenue was collected directly from them, and around half of the produce was taken as revenue and it was settled for a period of 30 years. The high rate of the revenue made them dependent on moneylenders. The Ryotwari system directly with the Ryots cultivators was adopted mainly due to two reasons. There were no zamindars or other intermediaries with whom the settlement could be carried out. It produced more revenue than any other system. This is India's map in AD 1805. The Ryots were forced to pay revenue even when there were no crops due to floods, droughts or any other natural calamity. Mahalwari system. In this system, a settlement was made collectively with a group of villages called Mahal. It was modified version of Zamindari system since the land, the forest and the pastures belonged to the village community. The villages were jointly responsible for the payment of land revenue. The Mahalwari system proved to be a curse for the peasants in the form of impoverishment, eviction from the land and exploitation at the hands of the moneylenders. The widespread resentment among the farmers of North India between 1830 to 40 was one of the causes of the revolt of 1857. Do you know? Commercialization of agriculture is production of cash crops or commercial crops like cotton, jute, oilseed, etc. instead of food grains for sale in the market. Growth of commercial crops. With strong footholds in South India, Bengal, Bihar and Orissa, the East India Company wanted to collect maximum taxes to meet their military and administrative expenses. The British purchased agricultural raw materials at very low cost and sent them to England. The finished goods were brought back to India and sold at high prices to earn maximum profit. The farmers were forced to grow crops like indigo, cotton, raw silk, opium, pepper, tea, sugarcane, etc. The British wanted to smuggle and sell opium in China so that they could earn huge profits. Indigo, called Neil in India, was in great demand in textile industries to extract blue dye. The planters led very miserable life due to very low prices of Neil. There was a great demand of sugar in the West. This attracted many Europeans to set up sugar plantation in India. The farmers who produced good jaggery for local requirement were forced to produce thickened sugarcane juice for the sugar factories and sell their produce at very low price. The British industries flourished at the cost of Indian industries. The farmers were suffering from natural calamities like floods, droughts, farmers and overburdened with high taxes, repayment of loans, debts and high rate of interest. The Indian farmers were leading a life of poverty and frustration. As a result, many peasants who failed to pay the land revenue and lost their lands became landless laborers. They were forced to work at very low wages. Thus, peasants found it impossible to support their family. Peasant revolt. The peasants were very angry and depressed due to their miserable condition and exploitation by the British. Whenever atrocities, repression, and exploitation reached beyond a certain limit, there was a mass outburst in the form of revolt or rebellion. There is a long list of injustice meted out to the farmers at various times during the British rule. Some of these are land revenue, settlement, and their administration, economic exploitation, especially of the rural masses, long-standing loans and indebtedness, eviction of peasants from agricultural land, and misery of landless laborers. I do not hesitate to say that half of the agricultural population do not know from one year's end to another that it is to have a full meal. Charles Eliot, a member of the Governor General's Council. The first major revolt broke out soon after the British conquest of Bengal, which was led by sannyasis and fakirs and spread to eastern India. It took 30 years for the British to put an end to this revolt. The Chinar revolt broke out in 1796 and continued till 1816. The Moplas of South India, Malabars, revolted against the increasing burden of taxation during the period of 1836 to 1854. The Farazis movement started in 1838 at Barasat. It was a Muslim religious movement. Farazis revolted against the oppression of the peasant by the zamindars and the British. This revolt went on till 1848. One-sixth of Bengal came under this revolt. Dadu Milan led the revolt at Bengal. The Wahhabi revolt was led by Sayyid Ahmad of Bareilly. They were Muslims but they wanted to revive Islam and they made Persian as the court language instead of English. The Deccan riots turned violent in 1875 due to indebtedness of peasants. The peasant movement of 1850 to 1860 in Bengal was a peasant protest. The indigo cultivators were forced to grow only indigo. The indigo crops had exhausted the fertility of the soil. Over time, the price paid to the cultivators became less and less. In 1860, Deenbandhu Mitra wrote a play called Neel Darpan in which he highlighted the atrocities committed by the indigo planters on the indigo cultivators. The indigo cultivators did not cooperate and gave a wage of discontent between British and peasants. Thousands of peasants refused to sow indigo on their land. The cultivators attacked the indigo factories. The Gomasthas or agents of the planters were beaten up in many places. The peasants also socially boycotted Indian servants working in European-owned plantations. Even women took part in the resistance against the planters. At some places, local zamindars also joined the peasants. The widespread nature of the rebellion forced the government to act immediately. It set up the Indigo Commission to look into the system of indigo production and suggest changes. Bengal stopped being a hub of indigo cultivation. The planters shifted their base to Bihar. Exploitation of the indigo cultivators, however, continued. The peasants' movement of Champaran in northwest Bihar started in 1860 and went till 1920s. The peasants opposed cultivation of indigo and high taxes. This is the image of peasant revolt. Pratapgarh, Rai Bareli, Sultanpur and Faizabad in Uttar Pradesh witnessed opposition by the peasants against high revenues. The Audh Kisan Sabha was formed under the leadership of Jawaharlal Nehru in 1920. increase in revenue was opposed by peasants of Tanjore in 1923 to 24. The first Riots Association was organized by N.G. Ranga in 1923. The Kisan movement in Uttar Pradesh demanded the abolition of Zamindari system. Swami Sahajananand and Bihar Provincial Kisan Sabha were established in 1929. In 1927, at Bardoli, Sardar Patel took up the cause of hike in revenue by the Bombay government. The Satyagrah forced the government to revise the revenue. Peasants of Kheda opposed the revenue rise. Summing up, the British brought about widespread change in the field of revenue system, agriculture, trade and industry. In India, these policies were obviously designed to promote British interest in colonial India. The British introduced different types of land revenue settlement in different parts of India. Zamindari system or permanent settlement of Bengal, Ryotwari system, Mahalwari system. Commercialization of agriculture is production of cash crops or commercial crops like cotton, jute, oil seeds, etc. instead of food grains for sale in the market. Whenever atrocities, repression and exploitation reached beyond a certain limit, there was a mass outburst in the form of revolt or rebellion. Thank you class. Let's meet in the next chapter.